All right, let's just jump right in with a wild idea. What if the biggest, most profound miracles in the Bible weren't supernatural at all? Back in the 1970s, a theologian put forward this really radical theory that these ancient, world-changing events were actually encounters with advanced alien technology. Yep, you heard that right. We're going to unpack that exact idea today, the connection between biblical scripture and, well, flying saucers.
And really, the entire theory pretty much hinges on this one powerful question. What if the angels we read about in all these ancient texts weren't divine beings at all? What if they were just astronauts? You know, messengers from another world for sure, but a physical one, a world of technology that, maybe, we're just now starting to be able to imagine.
So you gotta ask, right? Why would anyone even propose such a wild idea? Well, to really get it, we have to look at the problem this theory was actually designed to solve. See, by the middle of the 20th century, theology was facing a huge crisis of belief, especially in a new scientific age. Just take a look at this quote from Bishop John A.T. He's putting his finger on a massive problem for modern believers. For anyone with a scientific mindset, the literal story of Christ's ascension, being physically lifted up into the sky, it sounds almost, well, primitive. It makes it really, really hard to accept as literal fact.
And this really gets to the heart of the whole dilemma. I mean, by this point, science had mapped the cosmos. There weren't any vacant places left up in the sky for a physical heaven to exist. So the big question was, how could faith hold on to its most important stories when they seemed to totally contradict the known laws of the universe? Well, the most common solution at the time was something called demythologizing the Bible. Basically, this meant treating incredible stories like the Ascension not as literal historical facts, but as powerful myths, symbols of some deeper, inner, spiritual truth. And it was this exact idea that our author, Barry Downing, was about to challenge head-on.
All right, so this is where our guy comes in, the man who offered a totally different way of looking at all this. Enter Barry Downing, who brought a completely unique perspective to this whole theological puzzle.
See, Downing was not your typical theologian, not by a long shot. He was a Presbyterian minister, sure, but he also had a degree in physics. His entire career was built around this intersection of science and religion, which gave him a very, very different lens for reading these ancient texts.
So, here's his core argument in a nutshell. While mainstream theology was busy turning all these miracles into symbolic myths, Downing came along and proposed what he called a realistic view. He said, no, these weren't just symbols. These were accounts of real, witnessed events. And the miracles? They weren't magic. They were just misunderstood technology.
Okay, so how did he actually apply this idea? Well, let's dive into his first major example. It's a pretty radical rereading of one of the Old Testament's biggest events, the Exodus. Downing zooms right in on this specific passage. And think about what it's actually describing. The Israelites aren't just following some vague feeling or a symbolic idea. No, they are following a physical object in the sky. A pillar of cloud during the day that literally transforms into a glowing pillar of fire at night. And then he breaks down its characteristics. Okay, so it looks like a cloud. It glows. It moves with intelligence, guiding an entire population of people for 40 years. And Downing argued that this description, it was a perfect match for 20th century reports of these large cylindrical UFOs. Okay, fine. A guiding object in the sky. That's one thing. But how in the world could a UFO explain the most spectacular miracle of them all, the parting of the Red Sea? Well, you better believe Downing had a technological theory for that, too. He starts by arguing that the traditional explanation, a strong east wind, it just doesn't fit the details in the text. I mean, a wind wouldn't create vertical walls of water, and it definitely wouldn't have time to bake the muddy seafloor into dry ground for people to walk on.
So here's his speculative technological theory. Step 1. A UFO hovers over the sea. Step 2. It aims a powerful beam straight down, maybe some kind of anti-gravity or electromagnetic force field. This beam physically shoves the water back, creating those impossible walls, and at the same time, the intense energy from it bakes the seafloor totally dry.
All right, now let's jump way forward to the New Testament, because Downing applies the exact same realistic lens to one of the most pivotal moments in all of Christian theology. Okay, so the scripture says the disciples were looking on as Jesus was lifted up, and then a cloud took him out of their sight. Now for Downing, just like back in Exodus, that one word, cloud, that's the key to unlocking the whole thing.
His logic is actually pretty simple. Normal meteorological clouds don't act like elevators to space. So, he proposes that in an age where there was no word for spaceship or flying vehicle, the word cloud was the best, closest description they had for a physical, technological craft that could rise up into the sky.
You see, this interpretation completely transforms the ascension from a symbolic myth into a literal, physical departure. All of a sudden, Jesus' own words, when he claimed to be from above and not of this world, they take on a whole new, literal meaning. In this view, he was simply returning home, using a transport.
So, the big question is, why did Downing propose all of this? Was he just trying to undermine religion? Well, according to him, it was the exact opposite.
He actually saw his theory as a kind of rescue mission. Instead of just letting theologians water down the Bible into symbolic stories, he was offering an alternative, one that preserved these accounts as historical facts, just viewed through the lens of our modern, technologically advanced space age.
So, let's just recap the core takeaways from his theory. First, the idea that what we call ancient miracles could actually just be misunderstood technology. Second, this whole thing provides a realistic alternative to just demythologizing everything into a fairy tale. And finally, there's the really provocative idea that maybe, just maybe, beings from another world have been key players in these biblical moments all along.
So, in the end, whether you find Downing's theory fascinating, plausible, or just plain absurd, it leaves us with a really powerful question to chew on. As our own science and technology keep advancing, how is that going to change the way we look back and interpret the most ancient and important stories of our past? It's definitely something to think about.